We're all wanderers. We wander this world. We might be with people, someone close, family members. We're really still alone. Or you're alone, but we wander. I want you to remember that, especially this week, because of the combustibility here of a massive full moon that's going to happen in Aries and what we're building up towards. When we wander, we try to find our way. Some ways it's very ethereal, right? Some ways we use this, our intuition. We're trying to download or connect to the divine. But I think one of the major ways is our instinct and impulse on the path of wandering, where there is no other choice but to do and risk and gamble and move forward. And not only that, express it from a fiery depth, from the instinct within, where there's no other choice. Win or lose, win or die, all or nothing. This is what we're building towards here on the full moon on Thursday. I'm going to talk about some of the transits while I'm doing this video and some of the things leading up to the full moon in Aries on Thursday. But remember, wandering, a wandering warrior on the path. Let's jump into this. My name is Nicholas. You know me, you don't me. You can hit the subscribe button if you want, maybe later. Let's do this. I'm going to show you something here. While I make this video here, I want to point out some very important chapters in the story, as I say, going on. And one is big here on the Sunday. I mentioned this on my last video last week, and it has to do with Mercury in Libra at 29 degrees. The last degree here, when we do astrology, we do 0 to 29 instead of 1 to 30, right? So here's Mercury at 29 degrees, and we go look for Pluto. If you haven't figured this out yet, Pluto at 29 degrees, you've heard and watched a bunch of videos and you read a bunch of stuff about Pluto and Capricorn and the last month of this, right? And the final days of an era that started in 2008 and deeper issues of control and manipulation, but also of building supportive structures. That's what Capricorn does. It's ruled by Saturn. But with Pluto being there, this is a power thing, an obsession, and a long story. And Mercury here in Libra is squaring off at a 90-degree angle. That means they're challenging each other. In last week's video, I called it ultimatum, and this is what I'm talking about. We were building towards the ultimatum here. And not only is Mercury in Libra, Aries, that's where the eclipse stories have been. And so that's what I meant. We're at this place while I make this video where the conversations the last 24 to 48 hours and this week will be finality, the ultimatum, carrying over from the eclipse that we had. It's almost going to be 2 weeks ago, right? Which leads us to the full moon that's going to happen in Aries, connected to the eclipse story. You see what's happening. It's not over the eclipse story. If you're Aries, Libra, or any cardinal sign, you're not just at the negotiating table this week. I don't think there is any negotiation. I think a choice and action needs to be taken. And usually in situations like this, with Pluto and Mercury, it is combustive and it's about power and control. The other thing I will say is there's a brutal truth here that comes across, and I think a lot of times when it comes to ultimatums and endings and where things have to change, it finally all comes out. And I think it's been coming out here in this story for a while, but with Pluto here involved and Mercury kind of having to move through the final test of the underworld planet that is extreme at times and what it is and boils up to the surface. And so whatever is said, whatever is proclaimed, it's the harshest of truths. There is a certain type of obsession and focus here too. So even if Mercury and Libra doesn't have their brutal truth together like normally how Aries would do it, Mercury and Libra still trying to find its footsteps maybe. And maybe it figures it out that it can't candy around or try to balance it or come across in this more Venetian way, right, of things. It has to be straight up. And Pluto forces the story. This is happening while I'm making the video. Here it's on the Sunday. The interesting thing here is, and this is just to understand the setup for the full moon in Aries this week, is not only that here on Sunday, we have another transition that has to do with Mercury And I'll show you here. I just moved the chart. It has to do with Mercury then, after squaring Pluto, goes right into the sign of Scorpio. And now we leave the cardinal space, the initiatory space of Libra, and we get into the fixed water probing sign of Scorpio, where then now this has to do with what's within and the hyper focused laser cutting mind that Mercury, how it performs in Scorpio. We're dealing with cutting honesty, and we're dealing with secrets, and we're dealing with investigation and probing. And here, Scorpio's off to the side and you don't know it, but they're using a steely mind. You really want the truth? You really want to hear something, a true reflection of anything? You just go ask a Mercury and Scorpio. And before you do it, be prepared to hear it all. And that's what Mercury and Scorpio does. So you see what happens here with Mercury, Pluto, and then going into Mercury and Scorpio here for the next several weeks. We not only that, the moon will go into Pisces. We have Mars here, which is so important this week in general in Cancer. I'll point it out. Mars here in Cancer, 21 degrees. We see it here in Chiron in Aries. For those who've been following the Chiron story, we have a massive square that's happening here, and it's going to carry into this week. I'm doing this on purpose to prepare you when we go here until the full moon, okay? So that's just a little backup. That's just a little something here to get us to something else that is brewing here that will happen on October 14th Pacific time. When I do things, it's Pacific time. That will happen right off the bat. I will point out here that the sun in Libra is now squaring Mars in Cancer. You see how Mars is a focal point in here, and these signs of Aries, Cancer, Capricorn, the cardinal signs, right, that rule the seasons, they have a lot of the action right now. So now the sun makes a square to Mars, and we know Chiron is there too, the wounded healer. And the sun is opposite that. So again, eclipse stories moving on, and everything I think here is exposed. The wounds, the sensitivity, so on and so forth. The moon's in Pisces here, and it's conjunct Saturn, and it's moving between Saturn and Neptune in the chart. Like when we go into Tuesday, Wednesday, it's sort of the saving grace here. It's sort of where we can go to emotionally process, but still, this is sensitive stuff. And Saturn deals with reality too. It's not the easiest of things. The transits this week, I'll be straight up here. And I do this when I do my forecast. I like to take my little break. I'll be straight up this week. I'm not a fear-producing astrologer. I will be honest with you about tougher transits, so on and so forth, whether it's on YouTube or my one-on-one consultations. I'll tell you, like, I wouldn't do this, or you got to be careful of that. But I don't like to impose fear and then use politics or whatever is trending on YouTube or TikTok and Instagram to throw fear to get clicks. That's just not me. Okay, so saying that, I'm not telling you to be fearful this week, but this is a hard one. This is, I think, one of the toughest weeks of the year because of the full moon in Aries that we're leading up to and the transits that I'm showing you that don't give any relief, it seems, right? And the pressure's on and these decisions, and you're wandering on the path, and you got to make the choice, and you know the choices that you have to make, or someone on the outside of you is making the choices, or you're looking at the people on the outside of you and they're being wishy-washy about situations where you know the inevitable conversation or action needs to happen. You have to gauge this week with how you take the actions for yourself. And even if it's intense and at times does bring in fear, like, what do? I can't do this. I don't want to do this. Know what's happening this week. That's 50% of astrology, is understanding what is happening with transits, so then you can make the right decision for yourself. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I am going to say that it's rough this week, right? For the most part. And I think there's little things you can do to help guide you through this. So back to the chart. To do that, I want to get into something. I was pointing out this tension that's happening in cardinal signs, and I also want to point out something else. And it's amazing because and I'll do this in a way where I'll make it easier to look here on the screen. Like, let's see if I could do this. I always say there's a blank here. So Right here, I want you to notice something else, and it has to do with the planet Uranus that's been in Taurus here, and which is now retrograde, and here Venus in Scorpio. So while all this is going on, a really true Mars story. Remember, Mars rules Scorpio, Mars rules Aries. Mars has been a focal point in the eclipse story. Well, Venus has been too, because it rules Libra and Taurus. And we look to Venus here, and it will be here at 3:22 p.m. Pacific that we will have what they call a Venus-Uranus opposition. And this is electrical, unpredictable, erratic. You could see now Mars and Venus story playing out, which is the eclipse story here. And now we have this erratic, sudden changes that happen. Whether it deals with finances, that's Venus really dealing relationships, and the feminine, an intense, intimate, probing Scorpio. And here Uranus on the opposite side throws its lightning bolt and wants to liberate the Venus. It might not seem that way for some people, but when it comes to relationships, so on and so forth, certain kinds, you could see something being cracked open again here, and a certain type of narrative and story. We want to understand again this week the dynamics between Mars and Venus and what's happening. But we're at a place where we can't go back. And there's been the no go back feeling at certain intervals this year. A lot of times they've been happening during the eclipses that happen every 6 months, or lunations like we're having this week. But it's important to remember that it seems to be on shaky ground. How you can use Uranus and Venus being opposing each other to try to balance the two. That in a sense, that Venus and Scorpio welcomes the change, to take the viewpoint of that, to actually siphon the erraticness, the electrical changes, unpredictability of Uranus and Taurus, and to channel that and bring it into the fixed sign of Venus and Scorpio, and use that excitement, use that need for intimacy that Venus and Scorpio has, but to throw a curveball in the way where it can be used. Again, for some, breaks, sudden things happening. But the thing here has to do with the need for freedom and space. And I think here this contributes to the story this week with the full moon. We'll get to here, because I think it has to do with how much space the wanderer has on the path, where it must impose its will on the world because it cannot help it, because it's being called to. You are being called to do it. Aries know this very well because they're Mars ruled. Anybody who has Mars in Aries, they don't think in balance like Libra does. They're running on pure instinct and making decisions and dealing with the consequences afterwards, right? So there's a little bit of that something this week. Also, Venus gets this hit on it where it's cracking it open to bring in something more. Freedom and liberation when we deal with Venus this week. All right, so let's get into the 15th here as I breeze through this, because I know I go fast on these. I'm going to go on to the 15th to show you something else. Moon will go into Aries at 1:34 p.m., but it's at 5:48 p.m. on the 15th that the Venus story continues. And this is just fascinating, because here's Venus in Scorpio 27 and, just coming out of this opposition with Uranus. But we look to Neptune now in a cordial water sign, making a harmonious 120 degree aspect in astrology called a trine. Now here's Neptune. It is not Uranus. It is about dissolving. It is about washing over the Venus and Scorpio. And it's a water language here now. It's unspoken. It's deep. It's loving. It's compassionate. There's a softness that comes here, I believe, when Venus and Neptune get together. There's the fantasy and fog and the imagination of what love could be. In Venus and Scorpio, that's everything. It's all or nothing right there. But the intensity really to be and living on the edge of life, or when it comes to love with Venus and Scorpio, loving to the edge, or even over. And Neptune will bring it over. And if you notice here, there's the moon still in Pisces. So in the background the last couple of days with this tension going on in cardinal signs, Venus gets a little bit of relief here. a little bit of softness, as I wrote. I go from Uranus to softness, love in its watery depth, vulnerable and compassionate. That's my little place for you this week. That is my little section bonus for this week, where you can have a little bit of relief here with the Venus-Neptune trine with the moon there. And you get it only for a brief time, because after that, and I could talk about other aspects here, but after that, we will go to the full moon. I think here's the crescendo. Here's the place of the week, right? Is the full moon that happens in Aries here at 24 degrees Aries. You see the sun here is on the opposite end in Libra. They're opposite from each other. You're already noticing off the bat that the wounded healer Chiron's involved in this story, right? So that's there. Things are sensitive and raw, and we're trying to healing process. Hopefully we remember that the North Node is still in Aries. This is part of the eclipse story for the last year and a half in Aries and Libra. But we always look to the ruler, the planet that rules the lunation. In this case, it's the moon in Aries, and it's ruled by Mars. And we go look to where Mars is in the chart, and it's Mars in Cancer. And here we are, starting to get familiar for you, this Mars in Cancer transit the last so many weeks. Have you already been getting the clues, you Cancer people who have anything in Cancer? You've been getting a story set off here of things from the past coming up, dealing with issues about memory and lineage and family and what's comfortable and how you get your essential needs met. And in a sense, the moon is how it functions in anyone's chart of how one gets their essential needs met, is the moon. The moon is in Aries here. So how does the moon in Aries get their essential needs met? They are raw and asking. There's nothing hidden here. There's nothing. Moon in Aries is going to show you emotionally where they are at the time. They won't. There's times where they'll be angry, sad, extremely happy emotionally. They're not thinking that's what they're doing. They're just doing it. It's feeling. It's impulsive. It's the wandering moon on the path that's running instinctually, emotionally. The moon deals with the unconscious, and one comes up there emotionally, right? And it's trying to get itself fed. So like Mars or moon in Aries here, it's this simple. I must find comfort, eat, sex. It's impulsive. So if the planet ruling it here is Mars in Cancer, we're dealing with deep emotional stories here, because basically the moon, Cancer is ruled by the moon. There's a weird thing here, what they call, there's like a weird reception going on here, like a weird connectiveness, because Mars is in the home of Cancer, but the moon is in the home of Aries. Like they're exchanging planets here. It's called a reception. But you think this was good? I think it's, for the most part, really difficult. And the reason is Mars here is squaring the sun and the moon, and it's creating what they call a T-square in astrology, super tension filled. If one really wanted to take it to a deeper place, they would say it was a grand square, because Pluto's at 29 Capricorn, cardinal sign. Here's Libra, cardinal sign. And here we have this, and a wider view of it, right? There's this intense, there's no other choice thing. So after some of the things I've said on this video about how moon in Aries is functioning, what Mars is dealing with, how I started this video the last couple of weeks, and the transits this week, the conversations we've had with Mercury touching Pluto, the ultimatum, right? All this tension builds up to Thursday's full moon Pacific time that will happen at 4:26 a.m. at 24 degrees, and Mars here explodes. I'm saying that I think here there is no choice but the explosion. There is no choice here, because it's coming from the rawest and most instinctual places, and the moon is involved, and the moon rules Cancer. The moon rules Mars in Cancer here, and when Mars is in Cancer, or when Mars is any sign, it will push, attack, and try to get the agenda done for whatever sign that it's in, and it's in the sign of Cancer. Here, we must understand, and here are some key words I want you to get in your head. Like it will even matter for some of you this week. You can listen to me, you can watch the YouTube videos, you could read whatever, and you go like, okay, I know what's going to go on this week. You're still going to do these impulsive actions, some of you who are affected by this, especially those Cancer, Libra, Aries people. I don't think you can help it. So But I want here's intensity, impulsive, unconscious. It's all coming from the unconscious in the sense too, like what's unresolved and what needs to come out. Anger. We're dealing with Mars. We're dealing Moon in Aries. It can be anger filled, emotional. Because Mars being in Cancer, we have the protective qualities here. What Cancer will do, it will shell up or it will protect if it has to feel in a defensive mode. So if the actions are coming towards a situation where you're feeling attacked or one has to defend, which Mars in Aries, Moon in Aries will do, and Mars in Cancer will do. They will defend at all costs, and you don't want to cross that. At the other end, it could be like, I must do this. I must impose my decisions. I can't take this anymore. No more ultimatums. I must make a choice. This is my choice. I don't care what anybody else thinks. I don't care what it is, and it's all heated up in the moment, moving towards the full moon, and then we have wounds involved because of Chiron, and here we are. You would think that when you have a full moon with the sun on one side and the moon on the other, that the solution would be to balance the two. Inherently, it is. But I think here, the time for balancing has passed. The time for the Libra way of doing it has passed, way past. And the eclipses are part of this. The eclipses, the north and south node. The south node has been in Libra here, and in a sense, trying to flush out old habitual patterns that Libra will do. Now, I'm not trying to get on Libras here because I think Aries is part of this too, like with overdoing their will and smashing past boundaries and not having consideration of other situations. And so they have to learn here too. But in order to balance this, I think sometimes, well, not that I think, I just feel. I feel that I must do this scenario, aka scenario. My instincts have been telling me to profess, speak truth, and not only that, put it to action because it's a survival thing. And in the end, that's the word you should remember this week is survival, because people will be doing actions from a survival place. And again, for each person, how they deal with what survival is and how they perform those survival actions depends on who they are, their chart, and their past story, right? So it could be argumentative, demanding, so on and so forth. But on the other side, one has to liberate themselves. And when you're wandering the path, when you know there is just you and this world alone, and you've tried the other paths that other people do, or the path that you were supposed to walk, or what you were shown by your family, society, culture, right? But in the end, you got to forge your own path. You have to make your own decisions. You have to make or break, and you have to risk it. And even if you crash and burn, and even if you fail, you followed your calling. You followed the will. You followed the raw something that calls from within you. This full moon in the end, to me, is really all about that. But as we know, when we make decisions and risk with fear and survival and everything on the line, at least the feeling of that, we know there's byproduct, and we have to be prepared to say goodbye to certain stories when you must smash through the next step in evolution on your path. So stay focused, my wanderers, this week. Know when to make the chess move, but in the end, it's sword and shield this week. And if you got to lift the shield up and use the sword, so be it. Try to use the Venus and Scorpio and Neptune nights trine earlier this week to give you a certain love and compassion and perspective for yourself. And when it comes to making decisions this week and how the full moon brings things to a full boil, can you remember that and still take care of yourself on this path? And can you do it in a way where at least you soften the blow, or the blows are softened towards you? You at least try. But in the end, you got to do what you got to do. And you got to swing that sword. And you got to take care of yourself. You've never been here before. I am Nicolas Polimonagos, Sparkles of Gold. I love what I do. If you dig this, hit the bell, hit the subscribe button. I do my best. In one-on-one consultations, if you feel the calling, look below. You'll find me. You'll hit whatever link. In the meantime, we are beautiful, creative, complex humans. Accept that about yourself, right? Knowing where you are on the path and the one step forward that you want to make. Keep it that simple, and you'll be all right. So until next time, I'll see you on the next video.